The sun hung low over the Dakota plains, casting a golden sheen across the rippling waters of the creek that wound through White Widow's land. She was known by that name not for loss, but for the pale hair that shimmered like moonlight, a trait that set her apart in this rugged frontier. Her cabin stood solitary, a speck of order amid the wild grasses and whispering cottonwoods. That morning, as she stepped toward the creek with a basket of linens, the air felt charged, alive with the hum of unseen eyes. She knelt by the water's edge, her fingers trailing in the cool current, when a soft splash broke her reverie. There, half hidden by the willows, stood a Lakota warrior, his presence as commanding as the hills themselves. His broad shoulders glistened under the sun, water streaming from his dark hair as he bathed with a quiet dignity. She froze, her breath catching, not from fear but from the sudden awareness of his gaze meeting hers. His eyes, sharp as obsidian, held no threat, only a calm that seemed to read her soul. She noticed his hands, strong yet deliberate, as they moved through the water, and then her eyes drifted to the beaded amulet at his chest, glinting with colors she'd never seen woven together. It was no ordinary adornment, it pulsed with meaning, a story she could not yet decipher. White Widow's heart thudded, not from the man's presence, but from the pull of something ancient, something the creek itself seemed to whisper. She stood, clutching her basket, and retreated, her mind alight with questions about the warrior and the symbol he wore, a symbol that seemed to call her back to the water's edge. 2,398 characters. By dusk, the creek had become a mirror for the sky's fading fire, and White Widow found herself drawn back to its banks. The warrior was gone, but his presence lingered like the scent of sage after a storm. She sat on a smooth stone, her thoughts tangled in the memory of his steady gaze and the amulet's intricate patterns. She'd heard tales of the Lakota, their strength, their reverence for the land, but this was no tally, this was flesh and breath. Her life had been one of solitude since she'd claimed this patch of earth, her days filled with the rhythm of survival, tending crops, mending fences, and listening to the wind's secrets. Yet now, the creek felt different, as if it carried a message meant for her alone. She traced her fingers along the ground, finding a single bead, small and blue, its surface worn smooth. It matched the amulet's design, and her pulse quickened. Was it a sign, a gift left by the warrior, or merely chance? The plain stretched wide around her, silent but alive, and she felt the weight of unseen watchers, and not menacing, but curious, as if the spirits of the land were stirring. She tucked the bead into her pocket, its coolness grounding her. That night, her dreams were vivid. A great buffalo thundered across the plains, its hooves shaking the earth, and the warrior stood beside it, his amulet glowing like a star. She awoke with a start, the bead still in her hand, and knew she could not ignore the pull of the creek. It was no longer just her sanctuary, it was a meeting place, a crossroads of stories she had yet to understand. 2,402 characters. Morning broke with a mist that clung to the creek, softening the world into shades of gray and silver. White Widow moved with purpose, her boots sinking into the damp earth as she returned to the water. She carried the bead, rolling it between her fingers, its smoothness a tether to the warrior's fleeting presence. She wondered about his name, his purpose, yet why he'd chosen her creek, of all places, to bathe. The Lakota were not strangers to these lands. Their camps dotted the hills, their songs carried on the wind. Yet this man was different, solitary, his silence speaking louder than words. As she scanned the creek's banks, she noticed tracks of bare feet, deliberate and deep, leading toward a grove of cottonwoods. Her curiosity burned, but so did her caution. She was no fool. The frontier was a place of unwritten rules, and she, a woman alone, knew the risks of crossing boundaries. Still, the bead in her pocket felt like an invitation. She followed the tracks, her breath shallow, until she reached the grove. There, tied to a low branch, was a small bundle of sage, its leaves fresh and fragrant. Beside it, another bead, red this time, gleamed in the morning light. Her fingers trembled as she touched it, sensing a deliberate act, a message left for her to find. The warrior knew she'd come, knew she'd seek him out. The sage's scent filled her lungs, calming her, and she felt a connection to the land she'd never known before. It was as if the creek, the beads, the sage were all part of a larger tapestry, one she was only beginning to see. 2,396 characters. Days passed, and the creek became White Widow's obsession. Each morning, she walked its banks, searching for signs of the warrior. The beads she now had 3, blue, red, and white, rested in a small pouch at her waist. Their weight a constant reminder of the mystery unfolding. She began to notice patterns in the world around her, the way the creek's current shifted with the wind, the calls of birds that seemed to follow her steps. She'd always been attuned to the land, but now it felt alive, speaking in a language she was learning to hear. One afternoon, as storm clouds gathered, she found a new sign, a feather, black and tipped with white, tucked into a crevice of a rock by the creek. It was no ordinary feather. Its quill was wrapped with a thin thread that matched the amulet's colors. Her heart raced up. This was no coincidence. She held the feather to the sky, letting the wind tug at it, and felt a surge of courage. She spoke aloud, her voice soft but firm, asking the air, the water, the spirits, to guide her to the warrior. That night, the storm broke, rain pounding her cabin's roof, and she sat by her fire, the beads and feather before her. She traced their shapes, piecing together their meaning. The Lakota revered symbols. She knew each bead, each feather carried a story. Was he testing her, teaching her, or warning her? The storm's roar seemed to answer, urging her to trust the path she was on. By dawn, the rain had cleared, and she knew she'd find him again, not by chance, but by the will of something greater than herself. 2,400 characters. The creek sparkled under a cloudless sky, its waters clearer than ever, as if washed clean by the storm. White Widow walked its length, her eyes sharp, her senses alive. She'd begun to feel the land as an extension of herself, its pulse matching her own. The beads and feather were talismans now, their presence giving her strength. As she rounded a bend, she saw Hema the warrior, standing knee-deep in the creek, his back to her. His movements were slow, deliberate, as he cast a small net into the water, fishing with a grace that seemed almost ceremonial. She stayed still, hidden by the willows, watching. His amulet caught the sunlight, its beads flashing like tiny flames. She noticed his scars, now a faint lines across his back, marks of battles or rituals she could only guess at. He turned slightly, as if sensing her, and she stepped forward, her boots crunching on the gravel. He didn't startle, only nodded, as if he'd expected her. She held up the pouch with the beads, a question in her eyes. He spoke then, his voice low, in a language she didn't know but felt in her bones. He gestured to the creek, then to the sky, and she understood. This place was sacred, a meeting ground for their worlds. He pointed to her pouch, then to his amulet, and she saw the connection. The beads were a bridge, a way to share something unspoken. She offered him the feather, and he smiled, a rare warmth in his eyes. They stood there, the creek flowing between them, two souls bound by the land's quiet wisdom. 2,399 characters. The warrior's name, she learned, was T-E-A ring inverted exclamation mark A tilde superscript O-A, meaning his horse, a name that carried the weight of his people's bond with the plains. He came to the creek daily now, and White Widow joined him, their meetings wordless but heavy with meaning. She learned to read his silences, the way his hands moved when he spoke of the land, the sky, the spirits. He showed her how to weave sage into small bundles, how to listen to the creek's rhythm to know when rain would come. The beads, he explained through gestures and broken English, were gifts from his grandmother, a medicine woman, each one holding a prayer for peace. The amulet was his protection, a map of his lineage etched in color and pattern. White Widow shared her own story, her journey west, her choice to live alone, her love for the creek that now bound them. They were cautious, aware of the worlds dividing them, yet the creek was neutral ground, a place where trust could grow. One day, he brought a small drum, its beat soft but resonant, and she felt the earth respond, as if the spirits were listening. She added a bead of her own to the pouch, a green one from her mother's old necklace, and he nodded, accepting it as part of their shared language. The frontier was changing. They both knew settlers encroaching, tensions rising, but here, by the creek, they carved out a fragile peace, a space where stories could intertwine. 2,401 characters. Weeks turned to months, and the creek became a sacred space for White Widow and T-E-A ring inverted exclamation mark A tilde superscript O-ake. They shared small gifts. She gave him a woven blanket. He gave her a carved bone whistle that sang like the wind. Their bond was not love in the way the world might name it, but something deeper. A recognition of shared humanity across divides. She began to see the land through his eyes, the hills as ancestors, the creek as a vein of life. He spoke of his people's struggles, the treaties broken, the buffalo vanishing, and she listened, her heart heavy with the weight of her own people's role. One evening, as the moon rose, he showed her a dance, his feet moving in time with the drum, the amulet swaying. She joined him, hesitant at first, then free, her body learning the rhythm of the earth. The beads in her pouch rattled softly, a chorus of their shared moments. But the world beyond the creek was closing in. She'd seen riders in the distance, heard rumors of conflict. T-E-A ring inverted exclamation mark A tilde superscript O-ake's visits grew cautious, his eyes scanning the horizon. He left her a final gift, a small stone, smooth and black, etched with a spiral. It was a promise, he said, that the creek would always hold their story. She clutched it, knowing their time was fleeting, yet grateful for the connection that had changed her forever. 2,397 characters. Winter came, and the creek froze, its surface a mirror of ice under the pale sky. T-E-A ring inverted exclamation mark A tilde superscript O-ake's visits stopped, and White Widow felt the absence like a wound. She walked the creek daily, the beads and stone in her pouch, the feather tucked into her hair. Rumors reached her of Lakota camps moving north, of soldiers patrolling the plains. She wondered if he was safe, if he still wore the amulet that had first caught her eye. The creek, though silent under ice, still spoke to her, its spirit unbroken. She began to carve her own symbols into the rocks along its banks, spirals and lines that echoed. T-E-A ring inverted exclamation mark A tilde superscript O-ake stone, a way to keep their story alive. One spring day, as the ice thawed, she found a new signa, a single bead, yellow, half buried in the mud. It was his, she knew, a final message. She added it to her pouch, now heavy with their shared history. The creek flowed again, carrying the memory of their meetings, their silences, their trust. White Widow stood by its banks, no longer alone, but part of something vast, a tapestry woven from beads, feathers, and the land's quiet voice. She would carry their story forward, a bridge between worlds, etched in the current that ran through her heart and the plains forever. 2,398 characters.